Welcome to the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the world of entrepreneurship. Today, we delve into the fascinating realm of virtual teams as we discuss remote collaboration and explore the benefits, challenges, and strategies that entrepreneurs embrace to foster effective teamwork across geographic boundaries. Join us as we uncover the power of virtual teams to drive innovation, achieve scalability, and navigate the ever-changing landscape of modern business.
The Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast is your ultimate launchpad for igniting ideas and skyrocketing your entrepreneurial dreams. Tune in, buckle up, and let's unleash the entrepreneurial spirit within. Your two hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Hello, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing brilliantly. What about you, Professor Palin?
Doing fine. Now, where are you situated these days?
I'm in Wyoming right now in the Star Valley right outside Jackson Hole.
Excellent. How's the weather there?
It's brutally hot, actually. We were hoping for a little bit of a reprieve from Nashville, but we're not getting much.
It's a beautiful landscape, I understand.
Oh, it's absolutely stunning. It's like a postcard everywhere you look.
Well, excellent. We'll enjoy it. Ryan, today I wanted to talk about virtual teams because it just seems to be becoming more and more commonplace. And it was really moving forward pre-COVID, but then when COVID hit, it just became so common and people are staying in that mode more so than they were previously.
Yeah, and they're expecting to stay there as well.
Yes, that's definite. And basically, virtual teams are groups of individuals who collaborate and work together on projects and tasks despite being geographically dispersed.
Very technical definition.
Well, they're not in the same location. How does that sound?
There we go.
And there's so many digital communication tools that you can maintain real-time connectivity, and that allows for collaboration and coordination previously than, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah. As you said, especially over COVID, a lot of the large tech companies really scrambled to put their product out there that allowed people to communicate and work effectively.
Obviously, COVID was a factor, but it was moving in that direction anyways. For example, globalization is with us. It's here. Working with people across the world is not that unusual.
That and these products are making it easier and easier. So what was a difficulty or would dissuade somebody from doing it now doesn't exist much.
Yeah, the barriers technologically are virtually nil, especially you have cloud-based technology, real-time communications, and there's so many multitudes of platforms out there. The challenge now is which platform do you want to use?
Right. How do you make sure you're not on 12 of them and having trouble keeping up with each one of them?
Yeah, and if you're dealing with customers virtually also, you tend to have to go with their platform, not yours. And that's where you end up with being on 12 of them.
That's exactly right.
And I know also project management tools to work with that type of collaboration. I use Basecamp quite a bit, but if a client doesn't use Basecamp, they use something else, that's the tool you're using.
Yep. And it forces you to get in the habit of learning those tools quickly.
Yes, it's a juggling act. And most of them are intuitive. A few of them are not as intuitive, but majority of them, if you have some experience, you can work through it.
Right.
And you mentioned also people are expecting to be in virtual teams now, and that's more and more so a thrust of work-life balance.
Yeah, people got used to it. In the early days of COVID, there was definitely the struggle the opposite way. You heard a lot of frustration around not being able to go into the office, not being able to talk to somebody, or not being able to feel like they're leaving work at the end of the day because they may have set up a temporary office in their bedroom or a spare room in the house. And now it's the opposite. The struggle of going back into an office, having to commute, having to maybe feel like you're in meetings that could be shortened over some digital platform is the struggle.
Some of my students are still pushing against that. I'll get some pushback with they're working in virtual teams on the online classes, and they're saying, well, we're not in the same city. And I'm thinking, well, you better get ready for the business world because you might not be in the same country.
That's exactly right. I mean, you and I are a really great example of virtual teamwork. The last time we were in the same room together was years ago, but we communicate really effectively all the time, almost every day.
Yes, it seems seamless to me, but I bet you it's been over 10 years since we've physically been in the same room.
which is an absolute wild thing to think about.
It goes by fast, but we speak so often, it doesn't feel like that's the case.
No, there's not much of a disconnect at all.
That allows flexibility and agility because of the dynamics of working as a virtual team, too. It's a big benefit.
It absolutely is.
One of the big ones, too, that I see is cost savings. I, for one, would not want to be in commercial real estate right now.
Well, especially the branch of commercial real estate dealing with offices. That's right. It'd be a tough space to be in. Any major city in the US, it's pretty easy to look around and see the office spaces that are empty or trying to rebrand or repurpose themselves in some way.
And another area that's an advantage is you can leverage time zone.
And hasn't the global traveling community figured that one out?
Oh, absolutely. We've interviewed people from around the world, and we've been able to manage different time zones, just understanding the dynamics. I think the furthest we went out was New Zealand.
That's right.
What is that, about 12-hour difference?
Depending on where you are, but yeah, 14 hours.
Yeah, so that'll turn you upside down a little bit. And it wasn't a problem scheduling a meeting with the person we interviewed.
No. Calendar integrations with all these virtual platforms even does the math for you. I remember when we first started doing these things, there was a lot of mental calculation going back and forth on, well, if it's 3:00 there, what's minus 14 hours? Now you just plug it in and it'll tell you. Except this morning, apparently, when my calendar didn't switch over to mountain time. So I was an hour behind on everything.
Occasionally there's a hiccup, but for the most part, it works out. But there are some barriers associated with it. But those are some basic reasons why it's becoming more and more commonplace. That trend is not going to stop.
No, another really big one that I see is talent. So instead of having to go with the talent that's in your city, your neighborhood, your community, you can go globally to get the best person in that role, because it doesn't matter where they're physically located. If they can still contribute towards the product or the development or the team in some way, it doesn't matter.
Definitely. And the world is filled with talent, and it's much more readily and easily accessed to find that talent.
That's exactly right. It's exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. I find it very dynamic because I've been involved with the entire shift in pace, and it's a lot of fun personally staying up with it.
You started when you had to probably walk to work uphill both ways, right?
Yeah, and we had the tin cans with the wire attached to it as an interoffice communications.
There we go.
Those stone tablets were very tough to take notes on.
Oh, that's too good.
What are some of the challenges, though, you see with virtual teams? Because we've talked a lot of the benefits.
The biggest challenge I hear a lot about is culture. So although it's easy to communicate and communicate effectively, you don't get that human interaction, the culture that's built around it, the friendships that come out of working with people closely or being in the same office.
I agree. That's, to me, the biggest downside. It's harder to establish trust and team cohesion.
Right. The other one I would say is creativity. I sometimes feel like there can be a creativity that some of the spark doesn't quite happen over virtual meetings. Whereas if you're in a room and you're spitballing ideas or writing up on the whiteboard or sticky notes, whatever tool you're using, you can kind of get in a little bit easier of a role creatively. And sometimes that's a little bit more difficult when you're in a virtual meeting. Not to say it doesn't happen, because it does all the time. It just takes a little bit more effort.
There's a flow that happens when you're going out and having a beer together. You start discussing projects, and creativity seems to flow with that in-person collaboration. At least that's been my experience. There's something to be said about that water cooler talk for bonding.
Yeah, there truly is. The coffee machine, the water cooler, whatever you call it.
How about managing virtual teams, or even forming and managing? Is there any big distinctions that you're seeing versus in person?
There's things that are easier and things that are more difficult. Not having to manage the time that people are in the office and the social events afterwards. Before remote work, that was a big time consumer. What you're doing, when people were coming in, scheduling, it's so much easier to have a calendar with a set time availability to be able to put meetings, change meetings, move it back and forth. And you don't really have to consider the time it would take somebody to get from maybe a meeting room to a meeting room, or a building to a building, or a project site to a different project site, because it's just as easy as closing a window and opening up the next window.
You and I have used Doodle when we're forming meetings with people just besides you and I. We have access to Calendly is another one that both of us use. It's very, very seamless when you're looking at coordinating. And I use a Google Calendar and it integrates within that.
I use all of those same tools.
When we're scheduling these episodes where we're having the podcast discussions, it's just as simple as sending out a Google invite.
And those Google invites have gotten so much better. Google invites used to be pretty poor. They would display the host's time zone only, not the time zone of the invitees. Now it automatically changes it. Oftentimes embedded links didn't work that well, so you'd have to be copying and pasting. Now it's as simple as clicking on it and it opens for you. It's another great example of these technology companies adapting to how invites are being used and how calendars are being used in the modern day.
Some of the things with managing teams, and when I think of it, it's really not that much different, but it's a little bit more hypersensitive. For example, establishing regular check-ins and feedback sessions.
Right.
If you're physically in person, if you're walking by someone's desk, you can just say, hey, where are we on our schedule? Where you have to be a little more disciplined to keep up with the timetables of disciplines when your due dates are approaching.
You nailed it. You can walk past someone's desk and make a comment when you're in person, but scheduling a meeting to have an arbitrary back and forth can sometimes add a level of intensity that isn't necessary and make it a little bit awkward.
And, I have a habit of when something's due, I always put a time, when can it be done?
Right.
I've done that with in-person teams, and I've just carried that over to virtual teams. That's just good management of team dynamics. Other issues, too, is you want to have clear job roles and expectations. But again, you could argue in-person teams have the same.
Yeah, it can be a lot more siloed when it's virtual. The desire to participate in things outside of your specific job description is a little bit less on a virtual team.
One thing that's different is the communication skills and communication styles can be different than in person. I find that if you're just texting or emailing, people can misinterpret that very easily, adding some type of emotion that doesn't exist.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely classic. Yeah, it really is. People perceiving that somebody's annoyed or frustrated over an email, when in reality, it was just the quickest way they could type it down.
Yeah, they had 20 others to reply to within 20 minutes, so they're just fast and furious. Both you and I have a habit of writing very quick, both text message and email, so there's never a misunderstanding. That's our means of communication. But some people want you to hold their hand, if you will, and pat them on the head, tell them how special they are in the email. And that's not my style, and nor do I have the time.
And I quite frankly don't have the time to read it when people do that to me.
Yeah, if someone writes an email that's over 3 paragraphs, I probably don't get to the 3rd paragraph.
It's the sad reality.
So the communication skills and styles, matching that is very important. Though, again, there's a distinction that's much harder to do is team building activities.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've all seen companies go above and beyond in trying to continue with team building activities and the frankly weird things that they come up with to try and create that team cohesion.
Yeah, and I go way back to when I was in college and I was working for IBM, and we used to go play softball on the weekends, and we would play in that team building activities like that. It's a lot of fun. I don't know if I can get a team building softball team virtually.
You certainly can't. And the team building trivia via Zoom has been done way too many times at this point.
Yeah, it's not something that I'm interested in. But bottom line is someone that's involved with any type of business activity, I shouldn't say any type, of virtually all types, are going to have to work remotely and communicate remotely at some times. If it's not your direct team, it's your customers, it's your suppliers. It's just, you have to get used to that.
You do. And a lot of people didn't take the time to get good at some of the work remote situations because everybody thought it was going to be temporary. COVID was going to be a 60-day, 90-day thing. Well, 2 years later, almost 3 years later, we're still feeling the effects of it and people are still working remotely. Taking a deep breath and actually taking the time to figure out how to get good in these situations is really important because it's here to stay in some capacity.
Yeah, and it's okay during a team meeting if someone's cat walks across the keyboard. That's going to happen.
That is a funny thing to bring up. Everybody was so nervous. Video calls had to be perfect. And now we kind of get a portal into each other's lives through it.
You tend to be more informal and relaxed in that type of issue because life is floating around you, especially if you have children. Good luck.
Exactly.
Any entrepreneurs that are involved with this, they need to look at virtual teams from a long-term benefit strategy.
Right.
So any final words before we conclude on this topic?
It's here to stay. So invest in getting good at it.
Definitely. And just relax and enjoy it.
That's exactly right.
Sounds good. Well, let's get entrepreneurial.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
As we wrap up another episode of the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, we extend our gratitude for your presence and attention. Your dedication to the entrepreneurial spirit fuels our passion for creating this podcast. Check out ProfSpirit.com to discover resources and courses designed specifically for innovators like you. Stay on the cutting edge by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and other platforms as it is released. Until then, keep the entrepreneurial flame burning.